Hey guys, I'm going to give you some notes now on the weighted average stuff. Like I told you I would in class, if you understood the GPA example that we did in class, then you shouldn't have much problem with this weighted average. But we're going to do it based on a grading scale because this kind of gives you a good idea of how your grades will work in the class. So I'm just going to go through the examples here, and then tomorrow when you come into class you're going to work on the problems on the back, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have over it. So let's take a look at number 1 here. If your values are the following, which grading system do you prefer? So we have grading system 1 here, grading system 2. The percentages are pretty close, but notice your daily checks here are 25%, and over here they're 20%. And then homework and notebook category is a little different. But here are your grades in each category. So all we're going to do is we're simply going to take the grade in each category and we're going to multiply it by this percentage. And once we do that, we're going to add up all those numbers and we will get what our average in the class should be. So under grading system number 1, my test average is an 85, so I'm going to multiply that by 50% because it's 50% of my grade. And 85 times 0.50 is 42.5. Okay, and then I'm going to move to the daily checks, and I'm going to take 75 because that's my average for the daily checks, and I'm going to multiply that by 25% because it's 25% of my grade, so 0.25. So 75 times 0.25, so that's 18.75. And then the homework notebook I'm going to multiply by 10%, so I have an 80 average there. And I multiply that by 10%, so that's going to give me 8 points there. And then for my final exam, I made a 78 on my final, and that counted 15% of my grade. So I'm going to take 78 times 0.15, and that is 11.7. Now, if I add up all of these numbers here, it will tell me what my average is in the class. So 42.5 plus 18.75 plus 8 plus 11.7 gives me an average of 80.95. Okay, and if we were in Synergy, that would show up as an 81. All right, so my average under grading system 1 is an 81. So now let's take those same grades and let's look at grading system 2. So we've just altered the percentages a little bit. Now the test average is the same. It's still 50%, so we're still taking 85 times 0.5, and we end up with 42.50 there. That didn't change. My daily checks did change a little bit. Now they're only worth 20%, so I'm going to multiply that by 0.20. So 75 times 0.20. Not doing so hot on my daily checks here. So we get 15. The notebook is now worth 20% of my grade. So I had an 80 average on my notebook, so I'll multiply that by 0.20, and I end up with 16. And then my final exam was now only 10%. So I'm at a 78 on my final, and it was 10% of my grade, so that comes out to be 7.8. So under grading system 2, if we add all those up, we end up with an 81.3, which in Synergy would turn out to be an 81. But if we're looking at these two, and the question says, which grading system do you prefer? We would prefer grading system 2, because technically I'm only 0.2 away from being at an 82 here, whereas I'm still a ways away from getting an 82 here. So I would still prefer to have grading system 2 because although when I round it I have the same average, I do have a little bit higher average in the decimal places. Alright, so question 2 just says if you score 10 points higher on the final, how does your final grade change for each system? So all we have to do is change our final exam grade here. So from a 78, if I scored 10 points higher, I now made an 88. So now looking at each system, how's that going to affect my grade? Well, all we have to do is change the final exam number here. So for grading system 1, I take 88 times 0.15, and I now get 13.2. So now, instead of adding 42.5, 18.75, 8, and 11.7, I'm going to replace this 11.7 with the 13.2. So when I add them up again now, I now get an average of 82.45 for grading system 1. Grading system 2, multiply that by 10%, that is 8.8. And now here again, same thing. Instead of using the 7.8 here, I'm going to use the 8.8. So I'm going to add all these up again. And now, under grading system 2, I have an 82.3. Now here again, both of these grades in Synergy would show up as 82s, but you would rather have the 82.45 because it gets you a little closer to your to an 83. So question 3, it says if your homework average was 9 points lower, which one would you prefer? So in just looking at this, if I lower my homework average by 9 points, notice here it only counts 10%, here it counts 20%. So if my homework average drops, it's probably going to have a more effect under grading system 2. So let's take a look. Let's go back to the original problem here. We're using these numbers up here again. So now my homework average is 9 points lower. So instead of an 80, I made a 71 on my homework. So in the grading system 1, that only counted 10% of my grade. So I multiply that by 10%, so that's 7.1. And now, instead of adding the 8 here for my homework, I'm going to use a 7.1 there. So I'm going to take 42.5, and I'm going to take 18.75, and now I'm going to use 7.1, and then I'm using the original problem, so I'm going to use 11.7. All right, so let's see.
Coach Morris?
Yes.
Hey, they need you in ISS today.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, just got called up to ISS, so I'll do that in just a second. So we add those up, and we end up with 80.05. All right, and so that's our average, and then we could do the same thing for number 2 here. We would take 71, except this time it's times 20% of our grade, and that is 14.2 now. So now we add up 42.5, and again we're looking at these numbers, 15, and then we add up 14.2, and we go to 7.8. So we add up all those numbers, and we come up with 79.5. So obviously we want grading system 1 here. And the reason is because my homework average counted less. Okay? So here at the bottom, I'm going to let you try this one here at the bottom. It says use the following information, find the course average for each system. Do the same thing as you did before. The only difference for this one is when you have test grades, here you actually have to find that average. So you need to add these up and then divide by how many there are, and that will tell you what your test average is, and then that's the number you want to use in order to calculate this. So you can do that one. We'll go over that answer tomorrow in class, and then we'll work on the problems on the back. All right, so if you got any questions, just make sure you got those ready to go tomorrow, and we'll see you in class.